Hey guys, it's me, John Anthony Chihawk Soldero, the anti-hero. And it's kind of a little bit spooky, a little bit not very well lit, and that's because if I had that light on, it'd be like a huge glare and it looks really bad. So this is what I'm going with for right now. I'm going to adjust the brightness a little bit more. I'm going to do a series of 4 videos on the Laurie Strode Halloween storyline. I recorded a video trying to capture, the original Halloween, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, but it was like 50 minutes, and I had barely gotten to Halloween Ends. So I figured this way, if I do like 10, 15-minute long videos on like each movie, that's great. So the original Halloween from 1978 is kind of a masterclass in how to direct a horror movie. There are a couple little nitpicks that I have with it that are more technical than anything else. Loomis says that when Michael first killed his sister, he was 6 years old, yet in the credits, Tony Moran is credited as playing the 23-year-old Michael Myers when he gets his mask yanked off at the very end of the movie. And then there's an awful lot of driving for this being a very, very small community in a small suburb. In not the opening sequence, but in the opening sequence with Laurie, so like the third scene, you see her leaving her home, walking to school. And she meets up with Tommy Doyle, who comes running across the street. So presumably he lives nearby, right? Presumably. Because he's walking to school as well. And Laurie takes a divergent path than she normally takes to go to the Myers house to drop off a key. Now, all of this plays a very, very crucial role in what my issue with this movie is. Like, I love this movie for what it is. I love this movie because of the way the story is told, but it doesn't make sense for a couple of things, and I'm going to explain it. So, when they get out of school a little bit later, Laurie is walking with her friends Linda and Annie, and they're walking home. Okay, keep that in mind. They're walking home from school, and Laurie walked to school. So it can't have been that far away. On the way back to her house, they pass Annie's house. Like Linda kind of goes off in her own direction, right? So Linda probably lives somewhere in proximity, but you never see where Linda's house is. So that's not as big of an issue. Annie goes into her house. Sheriff Bracken, who is Annie's father, comes walking up and goes into the house as well after bumping into Laurie. Laurie kind of goes another block or so, or maybe even a couple of blocks, and she gets spooked by noises being made by trick-or-treaters who are trick-or-treating directly after fucking school. So that's kind of weird. It's like 3 in the afternoon, um, and you're trick-or-treating? Okay, whatever. So on their walk home, or no, Annie calls Laurie, and at this point she's seen Michael like 3 different times in the movie. Why he's targeting her still doesn't make any sense when you get rid of part 2, where it's his sister who was put into foster homes and adoption, and records were sealed and all this other shit. That would be what I would call like the sister trilogy, because that would be Halloween 78, Halloween 2, and then H2O. You'd surpass 3, which has nothing to do with Michael Myers, and you'd surpass the Jamie Lloyd story as well. The Jamie Lloyd story is different as well, but we could break those down. There's like 4 different timelines in the Halloween series. So Annie says she's going to pick Laurie up at 6. Okay, so presumably that's like, maybe 2.5, 3 hours away, right? Okay, this is Haddonfield, Illinois. At 6 12:15 here. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, okay? Like the end of the time zone for the continental United States. It was already dark. 6 o'clock in Haddonfield, Illinois on October 31st, and it's bright fucking daylight out. Again, just nitpicks in like filming methodologies, and maybe they only had so much time to film. But for somebody on as the caliber of John Carpenter, like I would expect better. But I think this was one of his earlier films. I don't know how many he made prior to this, but still. And then they just drive and drive and drive, which doesn't make sense because Lindsay and Tommy Doyle live across the street from each other. And Tommy Doyle lives really close to where Laurie is. And Annie lives around the corner from where Laurie is. So why are they driving through the middle of the fucking town to get to Tommy and Lindsay's house? Is it so Linda can smoke a joint and you can have a little bit of exposition going on? Probably. Or they forgot. So they drive past the hardware store where Annie's dad is, and then Loomis just conveniently comes walking up, and this is his first presence in Haddonfield. And then like the little things is like the little subtle things in this movie that really make it, that I didn't notice until somebody pointed it out in a review. And I forget who it was who pointed it out, so I don't want to give credit to somebody and it wasn't them or whatever. But you see the state vehicle like turn the corner and go past while Loomis and the sheriff are talking. So like Michael is within proximity of everybody, which is a great element to a monster movie, because in essence, Halloween is a monster movie. Like Loomis is your Dr. Frankenstein, and Michael is Frankenstein's monster, right? Because at that point, all he had done, and don't get me wrong, but like all he had done was killed his sister when he was 6. Maybe he had a psychotic episode. Maybe that was it. But in the ensuing 15 years, he never got better. That's the main issue with like Loomis saw nothing but evil in this child. The child stared through. He looked at a wall. He looked through the wall. He looked at this moment right here and right now, which doesn't make sense because a 6-year-old child. Have you ever met a 6-year-old child? They don't have that time frame. They don't have that wherewithal, which is why this becomes more of kind of like a supernatural, he's cursed element. Anyways, so Laurie gets to Tommy's, Annie goes over to Lindsay's, and they're literally across the street because when Tommy looks out the window, he can see Lindsay's house. And so the issue is that this becomes a survivor tale, right? Michael can't kill children. There's just something about that they're not gonna let out. And there were certain rules that you had about horror at that point. You kill children. He does kill the dog, which, I mean, at least they didn't do it brutally like in Rob Zombie's movies, which I thought was pretty tasteless. Like I felt like Michael killed the dog in Halloween 2018 or 1979, the original Halloween, out of necessity to like stop it from barking so that nobody would be alerted to his presence, which is another facet of the monster movie. He's stalking at this point. Like he's not in full-on kill mode yet. And so facets of this like that really interest me are like he kills Annie pretty easily after she's dropped Lindsay off to hang out with Tommy and Laurie. And I don't know, like, so I don't know how different babysitting would have been in like 1978 versus 1988 or 1998. But like if you're taking a kid over to another kid's house, and you know that kid's going to end up sleeping there that night. And then you're just going to cover for your friend who went out and got her fuck on with her boyfriend kind of thing. Wouldn't you presume to put that child in their pajamas? At the point where Tommy was no longer going to be going out trick-or-treating and Lindsay was going to come over, wouldn't he have also been in his pajamas? Again, a nitpick, but by no means like little tiny details in the story that could have made it that much better. A little bit more touch of realism, grounding it. So Annie gets offed in her car. Tommy watches Michael carry Annie into the house, where he's already set up the tombstone. Like, again, he's not supposed to be supernatural, but he's supernatural or whatever. And then Linda and her boyfriend show up, and they're tanked already, like driving. So that they're just, like those characters became kind of vapid, and Paul's character was really vapid because he's in the movie for like 5 or 8 minutes or something like that, and you really don't care about him. So him getting offed is fine. The issue with his death scene that's pretty interesting is like Michael's using a butcher knife that's like yay long, right? Stabs Paul through the torso into a wall that's not a solid wall. It's like a cabinet, like the sliding doors that like accordion open, right? Somehow stabs this dude who's a senior in high school, 19, 20 years old. He looks like he's 30, okay? Let's just say that. Full-grown man. Stabs him with a giant butcher knife. Still a big knife, but not this big. To where he stabs him through his like stomach. And I'm sorry, like a normal human being is going to be about that wide at least, right? Stabs him through that with a knife that's like yay long. Handle is still completely out of Paul, and yet the knife is somehow holding him up because it's penetrating the wall. Physics, they're real. So then he goes in and he kills Linda, and Linda's kind of an annoying character, played by the venerable and awesome PJ Souls, who's been in so many horror movies and is, from what I understand, like a really good sport at like conventions and stuff like that. If you want to check out another movie that PJ Souls was a part of, it's called Trophy Heads. I think it's still on Tubi right now, and it stars a bunch of Scream Queens and this guy who's going trophy hunting for Scream Queens. Like it's an interesting concept. It kind of doesn't succeed, but it does succeed at the same time. Anyways, like Leanna Quigley and PJ Souls and a couple other ladies are in it, and it's pretty fun. If you wanted to get like newer into it, I would have said Diana Prince, but also known as Darcy the Mail Girl on Last Drive-In, but I don't think, like, she loves horror, but I don't think she's been in that many horror movies. She's actually in Halloween Ends. She's got a cameo in it, and a kill cameo at that. So that's kind of cool. So, like Annie and Linda and Paul all get iced. Michael goes across the street to take out Laurie. Now here's like, while all this is happening, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm getting into the proximity of this fucking town, right? So Laurie walked from her home to the Myers house in a matter of a few minutes on her way to school. Loomis is fucking hanging out outside of the Myers house all night. Turns around and sees the state car that Michael stole at the beginning of the movie, right? When he escapes the mental hospital. So he's like, oh shit, Michael's here. I don't know what kind of a fine-tooth comb search they did, but they did it, and it took them forever to find out where Michael was. And the only thing that revealed it was the fact that Lindsay and Tommy come running out of Tommy's house screaming for help. Now, here's the issue the side issue that they never deal with. Nobody knows if Tommy and Lindsay were okay after this, right? Because at the end of the movie, Laurie has stabbed him in the neck. That was the first injury that she dealt to him. Gets into the closet, stabs him in the eye. Okay, that's an injury that carries over into the Blumhouse trilogy, the Laurie Strode Blumhouse trilogy. And he does have I think he has the puncture wound in his neck as well, or the scarring of it. Comes out, she demasks him for a second. It's the only time you ever see Michael unmasked fully and totally, to where if you pause it or you're watching with detail, you can see his face very well. All the Blumhouse stuff, you're seeing like this portion of his face, you're seeing this portion, you're seeing this portion, but there's never a shot of his face. So Loomis walks into the house, shoots Michael, presumably 6 times. Michael takes a swan dive. Laurie asks, "Is that the boogeyman?" And he's like, "As a matter of fact, it is." And then he looks out. Michael's gone. Great ending to the movie, especially when you consider that Carpenter was just like, this is a one and done kind of thing. If we're going to make this a series of movies, let's just do self-contained stories. But a really, really fun movie nonetheless. I highly recommend it. It's horror classic, slasher classic. It's not super bloody or gory either. So it's more of like a classic kind of horror movie, but it's also kind of your really classic monster movie or monster story, like telling the story of the monster. You don't really reveal him for what he is, and it's up to interpretation, especially when you look back at it now and you consider that it seems like Loomis has only been treating Michael for 15 years. And nobody else? Like, did Loomis only have one patient? He was either the most amazing psychiatrist that they were like, we want you on this case and this case alone. And he's basically hired by the state, right? And let me tell you, I've worked for the state, and ain't nobody got one person on their caseload. You might double that number and then put like 2 zeros behind it, and that's what your caseload looks like. You're manning 150 to 200 people, and that's probably even if you're a psychiatrist for the state. Or he's a really bad psychiatrist, and they're like, let's just put that asshole Loomis on this one character who's never gonna get better because he's 6 years old, and as far as we know, he's never spoken. Because Loomis met him when he was 6 years old, and up until the point when he was 21 when he escaped. Because if you do the math correctly, he's 21. According to the credits, he's 23, but that, whatever. So for 15 years, he's never spoken a word, and you can't be much of a psychiatrist to somebody who's never spoken. Not even never spoken, never communicated in any way. There's no notes that like Michael wrote that's like, this medication makes me sleepy. This medication makes me mad. This medication makes me break out and hide. Like, there's obviously no communication. So like at that point, like there's been no violent impulses until he turned 21. Like, what are you doing? Right? Has somebody really calculated just sitting there for 15 years? And that's just like a characterization, like weirdness amongst other things. But that's just kind of my issue. But that's my summation of Halloween, the original, the classic, the night he came home. That started. They say it started the slasher genre. I would argue that Texas Chainsaw Massacre really started the slasher genre 4 years prior to this. But the way Texas Chainsaw was made and the way Halloween was made are very different in their methodologies. And with Texas Chainsaw, it's not just one guy, it's the family. With Halloween, it's one guy. You got the one monster deal kind of thing. But anyways, the Blumhouse trilogy, the Laurie Strode saga, we'll call it. continues directly, a direct sequel, and it bypasses everything in 2018. And this is something that has been it copied Texas Chainsaw in doing so, because Texas Chainsaw did a direct sequel that was supposed to be like 25 years later or something like that, with one of the surviving relatives is in the new movie, but it's like literally like 30 or 35 years later, and it doesn't make any sense. So the timeline gets screwed up in that. Like the story is another thing, but they could have made it early 2000s and it still would have worked, or 90s or whatever, Uh, but whatever, yeah, early 2000s would have worked. But um, the one thing I have to say with the Laurie Strode Blumhouse saga is that they keep the timeline okay. Like the characters have aged properly, and that's basically because you used Jamie Lee Curtis is the same character from the first one. Like a lot of these other movies, like either the people don't want to come back for them, or they passed, or what have you, so they're not able to do that. But Jamie Lee Curtis being that character who comes back, that actual actress to reprise that character, really I think meant a lot to the success of the new stories that they were telling. So, anyways, if you haven't ever watched Halloween, I don't know what to tell you. Definitely watch it. It's great horror storytelling. Those little things that I kind of picked apart have more to do with like attention to detail and just weird shit that pop into my head. But your mileage may vary. You may not even notice those things, but you probably will now that I've pointed them out, if you even bother watching this video, which nobody does. So I don't know why I'm making them. Probably more for my own amusement and in between inking things and stuff like that. So I'll see you in the next video where I talk about Halloween 2018, the direct sequel in the Laurie Strode trilogy, or the Laurie Strode Saga trilogy. I guess technically it's a trilogy because Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills take place in the same night, so it's kind of like it's the same movie. You know, see you then.